Yeah, I agree with you. And I think I agree with you on all of it. And I want to come back to something with like soldiers who are training for war. But before we go there, just stay on the point you were just making. You know, I look at a place like Iran. I look at the things they fund. I look at the things that their leadership stands for. I look at the fact that 8 or 9 out of 10 Iranians, righteously so, stands against, supporting the regime. They don't like it. And I think it's wrong. And I think the world would be a better place if those guys weren't in charge. But I also recognize that sometimes, as hard as it is, especially when you're dealing with a country that doesn't exactly have a top 3 GDP, if you know what I mean, you have to let the people within that country handle their business.
Agreed.
And that does suck. I'm not going to sit here and say I love that, but the repercussions of putting 100,000 soldiers on the ground and calling in, NATO forces or something like that to start some war in the middle of a region that has a lot of oil and a lot of cultures from, let's say, a Khaliji faction who aren't going to like that, if we haven't learned that lesson from Iraq, I almost can't help people at this point. I'm like, what else do you need to see? Because it's also extremely important what you said. The guys who are over there fighting it, you guys are told to go over there and do it. It's not your call. It's a bunch of suits in D.C. doing that. So you better hope the guys in D.C. actually know what the fuck they're doing. And the last time around, they didn't. And I would hope enough of them learn that lesson. But sometimes I really do worry about that.
Same here. And I think, one of the biggest problems or elements that makes those mistakes continue to repeat themselves are the incestuous relationship between higher up military officials, big government contracting companies, and the Boeings and McDonnell Douglases and Raytheons and Halliburtons, and that whole you throw lobbying in and interests where people who are saying, hey, if we go to war with country X, my net worth is going to skyrocket by 20-fold in 6 months. Like, if that's not a conflict of interest and negatively influencing decision-making at the highest level possible, I don't know what is, because
Agreed.
You see it over and over and over. Dick Cheney being as good of an example of that as possible, is that, it's, you can give the correlation doesn't equal causation, but I think you can just as easily say, like, you can't ignore the fact that, Dick Cheney's net worth did what it did from going into Iraq to 10 years after the fact, and not say that's at least worth looking at,
Yeah.
And to question that is not un-American. I would say it's the opposite. To not question it is un-American. That should be the basis of all of our concerns, are that, the beauty of the Constitution is that is America's Bible that you should base your entire decision-making process off of, and why there isn't a more staunch constitutionalist approach in policymaking and especially in foreign policy decision-making is beyond me. I'm baffled at why we don't just look to that document more than we do, other than there's money involved.
That's what it always comes back to, is the money. Now, you have friends that either you served with or that from the military and the communities, who, plenty of friends who didn't do this, but then certainly friends who took jobs, and I'm not excoriating this, but took jobs at Lockheed Martin or Northrop Grumman and some of these other places. When people look at like the evil of some of that stuff, I tend to think, it's more, there's always a handful of individuals who probably are evil there. And then a lot of people who are there, it's more the conformity of the groupthink of the organization trying to get their quarterly report done. And that leads to bad outcomes. But have you had discussions, offline with some of your friends who work in some of these places and, maybe make money off of wars like Ukraine or, funding wars in the Middle East, about that conflict of interest? And if so, what are those conversations like?
I don't know anybody on a personal enough level to where I feel like if I had that conversation with me, one, they would level with me. Two, if they didn't, I'd be able to sniff it out, that are in positions to legitimately benefit like what we're talking about. Like, I don't know people, like I know people who have gone and worked for the Booz Allens, the Halliburtons, the Raytheons, et cetera, but nowhere near at that kind of level. You know, to me, you would need to sit down with, you know, somebody who's been, you know, a 3 or 4 star for a while in, frankly, any branch of the military, has spent time at the Pentagon, has spent time, you know, and knows Joint Chiefs of Staff and that kind of level of, connection and power, again, well enough to know and trust the conversation you're having with them, because, again, just nobody I know has ever been at that level. To me, the tricky part is I understand the benefit of having people who have spent 30 or 40 years in the military at the highest levels advising and even sitting on boards at companies who are making products for the U.S. military, because that's an easy thing to understand why that's beneficial, is that if private sector companies are creating products and technology for the warfighter, of course you want warfighters who have spent their entire adult lives there to be able to help advise them. So it is kind of a tricky, how do you audit that or keep it honest and make it to where it's not now influenced by, hey, if you come on the board of Raytheon and, you know, if you can talk with, you know, the SecDef, SecWar, the Joint Chief, whatever, and get this thing to pop off, and you know, you're sitting on 20,000 shares of our company, and we'll give you a 10,000 share bonus if you know, get this thing to be passed, or this allocation of funding for, you know, the new F-40 fighter project. I mean, whatever. Like, I don't know how you circumvent that or how you kind of clean house in that way, because there is a necessity for us to be an effective warfighting capable country to lean on the experience of military commanders and people with that experience. So that's a tough fix. I wish I had an answer, and I don't know what the right answer is.
Yeah. Is it even realistic to say, you know, the thing we all think of, which is like, oh, just get the money out of politics? Like, is that even?
I think it's possible, or it's relatively possible, or mostly possible, maybe. You know, I think we actually talked about this a little bit the last time I was on, but I think, you know, where and when you can have super PACs and large sums of money being infused into political campaigns, there's no way it's not going to be corrupt, you know, because the bigger the donor, the bigger the ask. I mean, plain and simple. And when it takes, you know, upwards of $1 billion to become president, there's no way to not have a candidate who, once they get into that position, is beholden. Even with a guy like Trump, you know, he certainly didn't use all of his own money. And there's also, you know, even more money for him and his entire family to be made, you know, by continuing to do some of the things. I mean, you're seeing some of it with crypto, of, you know, pardoning people that he doesn't, you know, I don't know if you saw this. I saw this clip just yesterday or maybe the day before, where I think the guy is CZ, you know, gets pardoned, and a reporter asked Trump, like, what's the deal with pardoning CZ? He's like, who? He's like, I don't even know who the guy is. It's like, okay, dude, like, that's not great. Help me out here. Yeah. Like, you can't say that you pardon somebody and you don't know who they are. Like,
at least I'll give him this. At least he's honest about it. Holy shit. I mean, my God.
I mean, to me, like, they're both equally unacceptable.
Yeah, it's
like,
not great.
If you truly don't know who he is, then you shouldn't be pardoning him. If you do know who he is and you don't want the optics of pardoning him and what that looks like, you can't lie about it. You know, like they're both equally terrible. You know,
I can't believe that is real.
Yeah,
he says he has no idea.
I have no idea who that is. It's like, okay, well then, giving Biden a ration of shit for auto penning people, that's really no different. If you're pardoning people that you have no idea who they are, like, help me understand that then.
Yep.
You know, and to me, like, you've got to hold everybody to that level of accountability, including the people you voted for, including the people who you're a fan of. You know, you can't give passes to the guy that's on your team when he does something that the guy on when the other side does, you lose your mind and throw a fit about it. So, like, seeing stuff like that doesn't give me a lot of hope. Back to your question on the, you know, finance and money in politics. I mean, one of the things that I talked about was using kind of the grand jury method of selecting politicians, because then there's no money in that, right? Is that if you're sending out a census style survey to every region and says, hey, in this county, in this region, however, the districts are broken down, is that, let's say District A, everybody who's been a resident for 10 years, is up to date on their taxes, not a felon. There's a handful of kind of boxes that need to be checked that says, hey, like this guy is on paper at least mostly or largely trustworthy. Who do you think should be your congressman? And then whoever gets voted into that wins, and just like with jury duty, like you have to submit it. I think that's a good way to start. Now, that's of course not going to work for president, but to me, the if you want to call it the beauty, I think the important aspect of doing it that way with the House of Representatives, Congress, congressmen and women in particular, is that is the primary check and balance or gatekeeper of the entire three branches of government in terms of policy decision making, funding. Legislation being passed, veto power, raising and lowering debt ceilings. I mean, there are so many things that have to go through that branch of government that if you have people who, in most cases, don't even want to be there, but enough people in their district say, this is the guy I want representing us, again, then he doesn't owe anybody anything. It's not something he sought out to do. And when he's in that position, his moral, his character, the way he conducts himself, his reputation amongst his community is at the highest level of anybody in that community. Like, what better person to represent that community than somebody like that? And so if you don't have people who, want to do it in the first place, and then once they get in there 3 weeks later, their only objective is to now stay in power and get reelected. And to me, like, you're never going to have an honest system when that's the reality of 97% of all congressmen and women that get elected. Yeah. So I'm not saying it's a perfect fix, but I think, shy of a full-blown fucking revolution, which I don't want. Right. I think that's a good way to start, and by that, then you can, term limits aren't nearly the problem that they are now. I think you could make it a single source, from a funding standpoint. Any type of foreign aid is a standalone bill, right? And it has to be voted on and approved one at a time. And I don't, to me, it's like, well, that's too big of a pain in the ass. You have to wrap it into all these other bills. No, it's your fucking job. And if you're going to give our money away from a taxpayer standpoint to other countries, you should have to answer for that. You should have to be able to be called to the carpet and stand in front of the people who nominated you to be in that position and answer why you gave $40 billion to Ukraine this quarter.
Yes.
I think that, to pick one thing to focus on that's going to give you the most bang for your buck, that I think, while not easy or without its hurdles, the most doable from in terms of actually implementing it into our government process, to me, that seems like the most doable, because then that can keep the Senate, the executive branch, and in some cases, even the judicial branch, if they have to be nominated through that, But to me, the accountability piece just isn't there. And I don't know of another way to implement it without doing something as drastic as something like that.
One of, if not the most common DMs I get on Instagram are many of you asking me what my favorite books are. Well, today's your lucky day, because if you use the link in my description below to join my newsletter, I'm going to give you my top 10 book recommendations right now. Also, if you'd like to join my clipping community for a chance to make money producing content from the show, you can do so via the Discord link in my description below. And finally, you can join my Patreon for early uncensored releases of the full episodes via the Patreon link in my description below. As always, please take 1 second to hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. I really appreciate that. Also, the like button's a big help, and you can join my newsletter via the link in the description. Yeah, and I love that idea too. But you're also raising the point. It's like you have to call things both ways. And there were obviously a lot of things in the last administration to be incredibly disappointed in, whether it was censorship of things or taking powers that the government's not supposed to take or prosecuting political enemies. I think when you start to do those same things out of spite, in this case now the opposite side got in, you're giving them exactly what they want, the people you hated, because now they have the narrative to be like, look at this. And, they can go do protests like the No Kings protest or whatever, which, protests seem to be very cringe in the modern age, but like they can point to a couple things. And even if they're taking some of it out of context, it's like there's enough things that they can say, hey, see, we told you they were going to do this, this, and that. And they did.
Yeah. I mean, to me, the No Kings thing, to me seems a little silly in that, the fact that it can take place, I think kind of disproves the tyranny
that's
approach.
The funny part. Yeah.
But I mean, that is what it is. But, to me, the precedents being set that we're talking about in terms of, going after political opponents with, if you want to call it, lawfare, I think is the term I've heard used. I agree. I mean, you did see that, in the Biden administration on a number of cases, and then now you're seeing some of those same examples. And the bitch of it is, on the left, it's the "see, we told you so." On the right, it's, well, they did it.
Right.
It's like that doesn't just set a precedence by doing the thing that you were bitching about 4 years ago. It solidifies it, and now that becomes the norm. And so now you can probably just expect that every new administration is going to go after the previous one. And that is a horrible place for our society to be in. I don't understand the unforced errors. It's one thing to make mistakes. It's another thing, to do dumb shit that you just end up tripping over your own dick on and making the problem worse. And I do see a number of examples of that happening. I mean, it's frustrating. There's no two ways about it.
It's a strange place to be because on the one hand, you want to be able to say things where it's where it's actually relevant and true, of like no one's above the law. But as much as you want to stick it to someone or get an individual that you think is doing things that are wrong, I think the bigger question here is, how do we keep not the system in place? The system has a lot of problems, but how do we keep like American principles in place? And I don't want to be on in a tough slippery slope here, but once in a while that does mean that maybe someone who probably should get some justice doesn't, because it's better for the whole. It's not to say like, oh, they're bigger than the system themselves and they prove the point that you can do it. No, it's more like, let's not suddenly have something like what you said, setting in every administration lawfare precedent where people, including people who, whether you like them or not, probably shouldn't be prosecuted, are getting prosecuted.
Yeah, I think, a fairly recent and clear-cut example of that is that Letitia James. I think that's a good example of what she did, I think, is very clearly wrong. Now, to go after her for something like mortgage fraud after the fact in that way, I think is, I'm not going to say it's as wrong or not. It doesn't even matter. Like, I also think that it's just dumb because it does solidify that precedence. To me, I could understand saying, hey, if you run on a campaign where you're saying, I'm going to go after the president, and then you do, and there's trumped up charges, and whether you think they're trumped up or not or whatever, to me, it's pretty obvious there was a very clear-cut political angle to what she did when she was in office. But there's also just as clearly identified political angle of going after her now the way that's being done. I don't like the lady. I think she's a terrible example for that position of authority and should be disbarred from that. But to me, that would solve it. It's like, hey, what you did was wrong, so you can't do that anymore. Not, okay, let's use the law against her and try to put her in prison over it. And I think the most frustrating part for me is that, it seems so incredibly childish what you see within the entire House of Representatives. I mean, really all three judicial all three executive, Jesus, I'm going to fuck it up twice. All three branches of government. Is that you have people acting like they're 5 years old on a playground arguing over dumb shit that ultimately is making the country weaker. I mean, the shutdown being in what, its fifth or sixth week at this point. You know how long the Constitution took to draft?
A while, right?
So I'm going to take that as a no.
Yeah, that's
4 months.
It's definitely a no, but
It took 4 months. If you think about that, right? Our government, for rapidly approaching half that amount of time, can't even get the government back to being not shut down.
wait, that only took 4 months.
4 months.
I thought it was longer than that.
Yeah. I mean, I think most people would assume it took way longer than that.
Yeah, I thought it was a couple of years.
If you think about the scope, the brilliance, the authority that document has had for as long as it's had, and how well it's worked, how quickly they were able to draft that, agree on it enough to approve it and declare it. I mean, to me, it's embarrassing that our government is in a position now where something like healthcare is keeping the government from being able to even function properly. I mean, it's pathetic.
Or a bill, to your point, that's over one thing has fucking 80 poison pills over totally separate things plugged into it at 12 o'clock when the vote's at 1 o'clock.
Yeah, and half the guys don't show up to even vote.
Yep. Oh, yeah. No, I studied the shit out of the Revolutionary War. I love that stuff. And it's actually crazy. You look at this skyline right here. This was one of the ground zeros of fighting that thing and all the history there that happened. But, those guys were so ahead of their time and had fucking elephant balls to do what they did. But I do try to think about what would they, if you just took 10 to 20 of like the main leaders of that revolution and brought them to today and took them on a bus down to Washington, D.C. and just let them walk outside for 2 hours, what they would think. I think they'd throw up. I think they'd be like, this is everything that we did not set this up to be. And you've taken the freedoms that we allowed for the government to be able to make decisions that where the people are represented to be used in bastardized ways so that the people can think they're represented and really just have a bunch of other things that they didn't vote for be voted on and go through.
Yeah, to me, the one of the most fascinating things about that group of people is they were like your age or younger. Mm-hmm. I think that there's parts of it that they would be amazed by in terms of how far it's come kind of, I would say utilitarian wise, like the different aspects of how much the government has grown. And then they would quickly become violently ill seeing at where it's gone. It reminds me of like the dad conversation. I'm not mad. I'm disappointed. I think that's what you get from him.
That's probably what Ben Franklin would say.
I think so. Yeah. I mean, to me, the most important thing about that group of people, at least, looking back at them, obviously none of us know any of them, but the results speak for themselves, is that, it wasn't any less messy then. Like they argued, disagreed, fought, insulted each other just as much as takes place today. But the big thing that they did very differently, again, and this isn't up for debate. I mean, you can see the historical record of they figured out ways to compromise and get down the road and move on. And we don't seem to do that. I mean, it's like they were mature enough to be able to see the forest for the trees and move on and figure out how to negotiate in a way where it's a net positive impact on society, generally speaking.
I think part of the problem today, and it's not the whole problem, but it's a piece of it, is that politicians are so beholden to people behind keyboards at all times. Meaning if they do the right thing, and by right thing I mean compromise on something that's better for the bigger picture, they get excoriated online, including by people who aren't real sometimes, and campaigns that are run against them to try to remove them from power or whatever, such that they always cower to the madness of the crowds. It's where democracy actually works against itself and what it's supposed to be. And that's one thing. I'm not saying those guys back then didn't have to deal with that, but they didn't deal with it anywhere near the scale or instantaneous scale that we deal with it today.
No, and especially from a foreign influence standpoint. If you think about even just 30 years ago, for any state actor to actively engage in and influence any policy in the United States was incredibly difficult from a propaganda standpoint, right? Because at that time, let's say 1990 or even 2000, really, for any other country to express an opinion, to influence a generation, you had to either be on the news, in some sort of publication, whether it's a book, a magazine, a newspaper, et cetera, or on the radio. That's not very easy to do, when there's editorial gatekeeping and, human beings in a place of being able to look at this and say, who is this? Where is this from? No, we're not publishing that. None of that is the case anymore, and so now you can have, bot farms of thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, potentially millions of fake accounts that don't seem fake, that are blasting propaganda just nonstop. And you combine that with, now 2 generations, millennials and Gen Z, of kids who have grown up where the majority of their political and governmental influence comes from their phone.
Yes.
Or from social media. So the entire planet, in a very nefarious way, has direct access to every single American citizen all of the time. That's never been the case ever before. Now, it works both ways. I mean, we have access to them also, even in places like North Korea or Iran where...
Oh, yeah, we do it too.
Yeah. But I think, that's why you see such a breeding ground for fanatical, type of positions and, distrust. And then it feeds into the government machine that exists now where I think to your point, when you have sitting congressmen who are more worried about how their TikTok reel is doing, and how many followers they have on Instagram or X, it turns into a very rock starish, A-list celebrity type of mentality, where it's like don't forget you work for us, right? It's not the other way around. Like, you don't tell us how things are going to be. We're supposed to tell you. And, it seems like most of them get in this position where now they have this big following and everything they post, they're watching and how people are reacting and are those people even real? And, so you have this very skewed perception of reality on both ends of the spectrum.
I think you're giving it too much credit. I think forget Hollywood actors and whatever. I think it's below that. I think it's like high school.
Yeah.
I think it's like a high school popularity contest with these people, and you're 1,000% right. They're worried about the things that are just going to keep them in power.
Yeah.
It's a separate conversation. We don't need to go into it. But an obvious point, seeing as your system that's preferred is not set up right now, is that the people who are in there sometimes are in there forever. There's no term limits. They're fucking dying, literally dying of Alzheimer's on the floor.
Yeah.
And yet representing the people just because they're that politically entrenched, it's crazy. And, I don't – you talk about the influence and the ability for that to happen more than ever these days. Of course, you're correct. I don't think there's a funnier or really sadder example, though, of when you talk to people who are either very pro-Israel or very anti-Israel, who both will tell you to your face that their side doesn't have an aspect of that.
Yeah.
I'm like, are you kidding me? Every one of you has fucking 11,000 likes 1 minute into a tweet.
Yeah.
I know that's not real. I know that both sides of these issues are propagandizing. I'm not making a commentary on who's right and who's wrong here. I'm just saying in general. Yeah. That's the world we're living in. Click, click, money, money, view, view.
Yeah.
And it's sad.
Well, yeah, and it's compounded by, the joke you made about my lion rescuing the deer, is that how much of that is even real? Because I've had, I'm sure you have too, I've had very pro-Israel folks on the show and very pro-Palestinian folks on the show. And when there's this just incessant, this is a fact, this is a fact, this is a fact, this is a fact. It's like, wait a minute, can we try to real-time fact check some of this stuff, and it's like, it gets to the point where it's like, I don't know who to believe. So many of the things that are being said, have been proven to be false. And there's examples on both sides of that. And so very quickly, it's like, I'm not sure that I believe anything. Like, I don't know what to believe. And now, like, I can't even believe my own eyes or ears, because technology has gotten to the point where it makes it impossible to discern whether something is actually real or not. Which to me, I think kind of puts the nail in the coffin as far as the technology and propaganda influence, is that you almost have to just kind of tune it out entirely, and then it defeats the whole purpose of even having that as a technological capability. But I've found myself doing that, where it's like I rarely watch news or follow accounts where there's very clear-cut slanted agendas being pushed on it, and I find myself just kind of ignoring all of it because I don't even know what to believe anymore.
It actually goes back to another meditation of Marcus Aurelius, ironically, where he's like, what one person sees is not the truth, it's a perspective.
Yeah.
You can take the image and go like this and see something, but if you could go like this, you see something entirely different. And I try to remind myself that all the time, but it gets hard because, to your point, the war that we saw in Gaza and the war that we're still seeing in Ukraine are, I would have in the past actually, I think, been wrong to call them the first like iPhone wars, which on a major scale they are. The better way to put it, though, unfortunately, is they're the first wars that of a distortion of reality, because you do have an aspect of misinfo videos that include AI or straight up acting and propaganda, and that goes for every side on both of these issues, on both of those wars. And it makes it really fucking depressing, because I do my best here, just like you do, to have the different sides represented, and everyone makes their case, and let everyone else out there decide it for themselves. Once in a while, my opinions come in as well. But like, people want these answers to be perfectly black or white, and they're just not.
Yeah.
You can sit here. I would actually argue in both of those wars, you look at the leadership on both sides who are different, right? There's not really a lot of good right now. There are not a lot of good men in those positions. I would argue probably none. And so you may have a situation like, oh, you don't like that Russia attacked Ukraine. I agree with you. There may also be some diplomatic decisions that were made on the build up to that weren't right, that also forced a little bit of that. Say what you want about Putin. I certainly don't like him. But then that also doesn't mean that means the leadership in Ukraine is like the second coming of Jesus. I got news for you. They're not, But people, it like melts their brain if you bring nuance into it and talk to someone who has an opinion in either direction on any of those matters. And that makes me really sad, because, it ends up being these Twitter finger wars with, bots saying 33,000 likes, 104,000 likes, whatever, this number of comments. And while we're counting all those likes and comments, 10 people are dying, 20 people are dying, someone's son is gone. You know what I mean? And it's just like, it feels like we're totally desensitized to it.
I agree 100%. I do think it's important to point out that I think the history of warfare and how it's covered, how that story is told from a historical and even when it's happening, a current event standpoint, has always been slanted.
Yes.
You look at state-run media, which was largely the case in every country up until around Vietnam, I would say. Vietnam, I think, was, at least it seems like, kind of the first test bed for real-time war correspondence. What do you got?
Got Cronkite up there.
Oh, yeah. You were seeing footage that's relevant. You go back to Korea, World War II, everything prior to that, and especially World War I and before, it's newspapers. So it's so incredibly delayed that every country has an ability to tell the exact story that they want told. So it's not that it's necessarily any different. To me, it's a scale issue. It's a scale and reach issue, is that now you have individuals who can do it, and basically every individual, and so I think when you couple that with Western societies who largely lack struggle, like we were talking about at the very start, and they need something to get behind, it makes it even easier for them to be manipulated into saying, this is my cause, this is my thing, this is what I want to get behind, this is what I'm passionate about. And so it's just by orders of magnitude, it's highlighting and kind of putting that, here's the agenda or the slant on the story that we want told. It's magnifying it and just blowing it completely out of the water, and in all of those same ways, just way worse.
Yeah. Now you actually did a recent podcast that I didn't watch.
I appreciate that.
Sorry. Part of it was
thanks for the support.
Part of it was because I knew you were coming on, and I kind of wanted to see like where you were at with things. But it was a few weeks ago. You put one out with, I believe, an ex-Special Forces guy talking about the Israel-Palestine thing, and this was an issue where he had been pro-Israel and now he's pro-Palestine, and so you were getting, I think it was like 4 hours long too, so you were really getting that perspective on it. But now that we do have this, tentative, I'll call it, peace deal, where, it's not the continuing barrage, at least at the moment, how do you view this thing? Do you have any hope, not even necessarily for like sustained peace and a two-state solution in the Middle East, but for like some form of, I even dare to say this, like normalcy?
Yeah. I mean, the short answer is I don't fucking know. Yeah. Like, I don't even know what being hopeful looks like almost, because it's been so distorted for a long enough time to where, again, it's so hard to believe what anyone who's hyper passionate on either side, it's hard to believe them. One of my litmuses, I would say, and I don't know if you find yourself subscribing to the same kind of methodology when you talk to people about deep things that they're passionate about, is that the more emotional somebody typically gets about something, I find myself the less likely it is that I start to believe them. And it's not to say that automatically if somebody's emotional about something that they're lying. The reason I bring that up is that, if there's one thing I've learned, and like, again, a lot of it stems from dog training. A lot of what I've learned about people is actually from training dogs and training dogs for people, training people how to handle the dogs that I've trained for them. Like you learn an incessant amount about human psychology and canine psychology, the parallels, et cetera. The reason I bring that up is that there's a very kind of poignant adage that I always remind myself, especially in dog training and interviewing people, is that when emotion runs high, logic runs low every single fucking time. And so it kind of naturally, like the more emotional somebody gets, the less logic and reason you see infused into that perspective, because it's clouded. When do we make our worst decisions? When we're emotional? When do we make the most mistakes? When do we panic? When are we the most impulsive? When are we the most mean? When we're emotional. On the flip side, when are we the most calculated and the most logic driven? It's when you're not emotional, when you're using logic and reason to sift through and sort through different components of whatever issue you're talking about. And, again, like entrepreneurship, if you're pissed because somebody didn't show up on the show, fuck that guy, he's not coming, because you're mad about it. It's like, okay, take a step back for a second. Think about the big picture of the show. Does it make sense to do whatever, direction you want to take the show or whatever? How much of that is an emotional decision versus a rational one? And like, show me a time where the emotional decision is the right one. Like it generally doesn't happen, and so again, just like when I see people, mudslinging and name calling and raising their voice and sitting on the edge of their seat, and everything about their body language says I'm angry about this, I'm emotional, like I'm not able to even control my own physical response to the question that you just asked me. Like, that tells me a lot about what the fuck you're saying. Yes. Like how you're saying it, all of the different nuances non-verbally that you're communicating tells me more than what you're actually saying, And so those are the parallels that I see, when there's these issues that people get really, really heated about. It's like that immediately puts me in this position of being even more skeptical than I was before. And so, in terms of where my position is, it's like I in a lot of ways don't really have one, or almost have a fatigue with the entire issue in itself because of that, is because it's so toxic and so nasty on both sides, where it's like if you can't And again, it goes back to the politics side of it. Like if you can't hold your own side to the same level of account, like if either side is going to say we've done nothing wrong, we are the victim here in every single instance, it's like that's not accurate.
It's a non-starter.
Yeah, it's like how are we going to have a conversation when you start with saying something that is frankly impossible?
Right.
So yeah, it's really, the whole thing has worn me out to where like I'm kind of over talking about it for those reasons.
Yeah, we were talking about doing a debate in here. This is like towards the end of the summer, beginning of the fall, between two people on very opposite sides of the issue. And then when we were going to go schedule it is right when the peace deal happened. And one of them I actually still have to call next week or this week and talk to him about it. But the other one I got to talk to the other day, and I said, I, like you, am fatigued with this. And secondly, the idea of having the debate was also because it's an ongoing, complete, like, immediate conflict at the moment. And now, like, I'd like to see the temperature go down a little bit. That would be good for all. I'm not saying it solves all the issues or anything like that, but it does feel like the bots have won. And I don't mean any bots on either side. I mean just in general. It feels like the bots have successfully made this the issue that is at the center of everything, no matter how you look at it. And that is just not the case. It is a big deal. It is horrible what's going on. It is consequential to the world. I don't want to like undercut it. But when you can't talk about a single thing going on in society without mentioning Israel, Gaza, you're probably looking at it not quite the right way. And when you say people get emotional about it, the thing that keeps coming in my head is that I have not talked with a single person who is hardcore on one side of the issue, that like either one, who is not extremely emotional about it, which tells me, guess what? The overall answer across 75 to 100 years is somewhere here.
Right.
Imagine that.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I try to conduct myself that way all the time for that exact reason. Is that I know for me, like the more emotional somebody gets, the less I listen to them. It turns into the Charlie Brown teacher, where you're just drowning it out and not even paying attention. Yeah. But I think more importantly is that, again, it's just a reflection of where their head's at, and it's not in an appropriate headspace to actually have a reasonable discussion with somebody on anything.
I was reading this the other day, back when the ancient Roman Empire was at its peak, and there were all kinds of military campaigns. Literally, the way the generals would make a decision was when they would be faced with something that was extremely difficult or high stress, or the essence of time certainly was not on their side, they would step back and ask themselves, as a rule, what would I wish upon my worst enemy right now if they were in my position? What decision would I want them to make? And it was why they were able to be so successful for so long, because they implemented this rule in that it would literally take the emotion out of the situation, because the answer was always something that was highly emotional, reactionary, and anger driven rather than tactical and strategic driven. And that is something we could all take a lesson from in society today. Yeah.
And again, you can see that in all walks of life, even things that are not nearly as serious, whether it's playing a game, business, relationships, what have you, personal relationships, that, when you're upset with somebody, is that the time to talk about serious life-changing decisions? No, it's not, because you're going to say things you either don't mean or that are overblown. You're going to make irrational decisions that are based on emotion and not logic. And I think it's a mistake. And to me, the way somebody acts when they're angry with somebody also tells you a lot. I think, again, just as much in personal relationships, not to turn this into a Dr. Phil episode, but, one thing kind of in that same vein that I remember hearing that I really liked is listen to people when they tell you things when they're mad. Because it's something they've been wanting to tell you for a long time. It's been something they've been thinking about and wanted to tell you for a long time. And so to me, there's an element in that, and that, it's like the people, when they're discussing these things, are are having those moments of lashing out and being mean about things and overblowing things. But I love that that Roman Empire aspect of strategy, looking at it that way, which I think sounds like it in a large way goes in line with Sun Tzu and knowing your enemy in that same way, but maybe in a roundabout way. But like, to me, the dumbest part about all of this is that these are lessons that we as human beings have known for millennia, and we still fuck them up.
Well, we forgot about de Blasio 4 years ago. You think we're going to forget about a fucking lesson from 2000?
Yeah, probably.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Sadly. What that rule does, though, that what the Roman generals would do is it made them look at themselves from outside their body as if they were watching themselves in their own documentary.
Yeah.
If it's a hard thing to think about. So sometimes I do try to think about that. I remember Joe Rogan used to talk about that all the time, where he's like, imagine every day there's a movie being filmed of you and what you're doing is being captured. How would you act and what would you do? It's one thing to think that concept and be like, oh, of course. It's another thing then to live throughout the day, especially when you're alone, and actually like put that visual into place and not do these things and maybe not sit here and scroll on your phone for 15 minutes and wonder what that would look like. But when you are in a group of people like that in a high stress situation and you can do a literal exercise that forces you to do that, it's amazing that good decisions often get made. And by amazing, I mean not amazing at all.
Boring, calculated,
Yep.
not exciting. I mean, it's a brilliant way to look at it. If there's one way to kind of keyhole or force yourself to do the right thing when nobody's looking is view it that way.
Yeah.
Imagine everybody can see what you're doing right now. Are you still going to do that thing?
Yep.
If the answer is no, then there's a reason for that, which I love. Is that coin providing some solace, some comfort for you
Absolutely.
right now? It's kind of hot.
I'm one of these people that, like, you put some in my hand, I'm going to use it
Your
as a
fidget
prop.
spinner.
Oh yeah, it's just how I am. Like yesterday, we had this guy Gus Gonzalez in here. He's a cave diver around the world, does crazy shit, and he gave me like this cave line at the beginning, and I realized the whole time I was like going like this and that. So if it's not this or something else, I don't know. It like helps me think. So. The coin's giving me a little inspo today because I got a fellow Marcus Aurelius fan in here. I
actually think the if it's don't true, don't say it. If it's not right, don't do it. I think that's Epictetus, actually. I don't know if
damn it,
you can look that up. But
did we get that wrong?
Did I get that wrong?
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
I'm here singing your praises as to what you got on the coin. It might not be the right guy.
Well, no,
the front
Marcus
side is right.
It's not true, don't say it. No, it's Marcus Aurelius.
Okay.
Yeah, I was going to say, I feel like I heard him say that.
Yeah.
You heard him say that.
I heard him say that. I audiobook heard him say it.
Well, I watched that movie. I mean, maybe,
Oh, yeah. Have you watched the second one?
I actually did recently.
Yeah.
What'd you think? Gladiator, we're talking about.
Yeah, I'm almost embarrassed to admit this because it's stupid, right? That I would be so distracted by something so trivial. Yet I found myself, you probably know what I'm going to say, Denzel's accent in the movie is so fucking out of left field. I was distracted by it. It's like he's one of the best actors of our time. How did you not do a better job at sounding like everybody else?
Here's the thing. He was amazing in the movie.
Yeah.
But if you go watch, and I'm like the biggest Denzel fan ever.
Same here.
You go watch his entire career, I think Denzel made a decision very early on.
This is me.
That this is how I talk. So no matter what the role is, the one thing that will not change is I'm from Mount Vernon and this is how I sound.
Yeah. And I want to clear something up before the comment section explodes, which it probably already will before they hear me say this. It's not a race thing.
All right. I wasn't.
Yeah, I know.
It really went there.
No. The reason I bring that up, because I found myself, did you watch Napoleon?
I did not. I heard it was terrible.
For the exact same reason. It's equally terrible. Like there's an element of the accent that just does not fit so bad to where it at least for me, I mean, maybe my simple mind is that like I just found myself distracted by it. Like, and again, it's almost embarrassing to say, like, can't you look past that? It was distracting. it was that distracting. Overall, though, I actually did really like the movie.
I'm not happy they made it because they made a perfect film the first time. Every frame of that is told in the most beautiful, perfect, visually appealing way possible. But they did make it. And for all the shit that it got, I found myself disliking it a lot less. I think visually it was incredibly done. Some of the storytelling was a little bit stale and a little bit repeated. You know, Pascal was put in not the best spot to almost try to be like a repeat, like Son of Russell Crowe. You know what I mean? But it was not like, I was entertained by it, and I thought it was good, and I do like anything like ancient Rome. So I wasn't like really pissed about it, but you know.
Do you think they could have done a better job casting wise for Pascal? Could they have had a more physically dominant presence wise guy play that role, and it would have been a better fit? I think so.
I mean, he looked pretty good. I see what you're saying. It wasn't quite like Russell Crowe looking like he was going to go fight someone on the street of Australia, like back in the day. But I think he was like a little limited by the script of the character. I think he kind of had to play to that. It's kind of like what Brad Pitt thought about Troy, which I actually think is a underrated, misunderstood movie. Everyone who was in that movie hated it.
Really?
Every single person. Peter O'Toole said he walked out 15 minutes in and that was a disgrace. Brad Pitt said it was the biggest mistake of his career. Orlando Bloom can't even watch it because he hated the whole thing and hated the scene where he had to crawl back to his brother.
Really?
But like, you know, it's actually, especially if you watch the director's cut, it's a really solid movie. It doesn't have like the mystery and stuff like that, like Brad Pitt was saying, but it's well done. And Brad Pitt was a guy who didn't necessarily go all the way with the accent, but it was just enough that like he wasn't trying too hard, and he kind of nailed the stoic Achilles. Yeah, I thought.
Yeah, I thought it was a great movie. I had no idea that the entire cast hated it.
Yeah, there maybe part of it was like it's like such a well-known story that they were like, well, we got to put some spin on it to keep the audience in suspense. But I don't know. I literally rewatched it like a month ago, the director's cut.
Yeah.
It's I'm not going to sit here and say it's The Godfather, but like it's really fucking good.
Yeah.
You know, it's going to be interesting to see how Nolan does The Odyssey though.
Yeah.
Because that's the sequel.
Yeah, and I can't imagine him fucking anything up.
No.
So yeah, I'm excited for that one.
I would watch anything Christopher Nolan does.
Yeah.
He's so like, even like Inception is a movie that's so hard to follow, and I only ever watched it once. But like, even that one, everything else is done so well that at the end, you're like, I'm not really sure what happened, but that was a good 2.5 hours.
Yeah. Do you have a favorite of his?
Dark Knight.
Yeah.
Dark Knight is a perfect film, start to finish, and like Nolan shot that beautifully. And of course, like I could name every film. Like Interstellar obviously is unbelievable. You know, I think Dark Knight Rises is an unbelievable movie that was misunderstood at the time it came out. But Dark Knight, the thing that does have to be said is like, this is not hindsight 2020 of like, oh, Heath Ledger died, so we're going to say nice things about him. Heath Ledger in every frame of that movie is perfect. There is not a thing he does with his body that's wrong. There is not a tick of his face that moves in the wrong direction. There is not one fucking tone or motion of the voice that's off. Every single thing is so perfect that he took the most cartoonish supervillain like ever. And even though you know this is a superhero movie where things are literally supposed to not be real, you were suspended in belief that like this is 100% fucking real. This guy exists.
Yeah.
He's amazing, and Nolan obviously captured that great. But yeah, that's a top 5 or 6 movie of all time for me.
Yeah.
What about you? What's your favorite Nolan?
Interstellar all day long. That's my favorite movie of all time. So, like hands down, it's absolutely my favorite. You know,
so good.
Yeah, it's amazing. I mean, just everything about it. I love movies like that. Also, I'm not really a sci-fi guy generally speaking. But that movie like has enough, I could see that happening in it to where it doesn't feel like it's not real, you know? And yeah, just the story. And to me, there's a special part of it where the relationship between, Matthew McConaughey. I can't remember his. Is it Coop?
Cooper.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's my favorite movie of all time, clearly. Between him and his daughter
Yes.
that just really resonates with me, being a father of two of them. There's that part of the story for me, I think is what seals the deal for it, I think.
What's the line? Love is the one thing that doesn't bend to time and space. It just
Allegedly.
is.
Yeah.
I think, but to your point, like you say, sci-fi, there's, they had Kip Thorne, the legendary physicist, work on that film. And there are a lot of physicists, they're never going to say it's perfect, but that have talked about it and said like, hey, that actually, there's a lot that they got right there. And the way that it was portrayed. And then later, I think when we got the first imagery of a real black hole, probably like 5 years after the movie came out or something like that, people were like, holy shit, Nolan kind of nailed it ahead of time. So yeah, I mean, it's a perfect film. And it does make you think about a lot of stuff. One of the things about Christopher Nolan with his films is that, looking back on it now, hindsight 2020, he's a guy who seems to quietly, like I've never heard him talk about society and stuff like that, but in his films, he has his finger right on the pulse of where things are. I noticed when I watched Dark Knight Rises again recently, which was filmed in 2011 and came out in 2012, I was like, oh shit. Like there's a lot about, it's a superhero movie, has some crazy plots, but like there's a lot about society, like elites versus everyone, the pain that comes after chaos that I'm looking at today and I'm going, ooh,
yeah,
he knew what was going on. Interstellar is another one that has some themes about, us being able to be on this planet that as the years go by, you're like,
yeah,
maybe that's not outside the realm of possibility.
Yeah.
And then, Deep's yelling at me over here, of course, Oppenheimer. And everything, who was a guy ahead of his time for multiple different reasons.
Yeah.
He told that story really well.
Yeah. Yeah, I can't think of anything he's done that I wasn't impressed with, But an amazing dude, no doubt about it.
For sure. So we'll see what he does with the Odyssey. But back to some of the stuff we were talking about, we're starting to work our way around the world and things going on. I always like to get your opinions on these things. But one of the things that I feel like has gone really under the radar while everyone's so distracted fighting on Twitter over fucking Israel and Palestine is that you still have other major countries around the world making moves and doing things that matter at scale, because we're talking about huge GDPs, and obviously the largest of which is China. You're talking about 1 billion people, a place that's run by a Communist Party leadership that rules with an iron fist, a place where all of their innovation that is capitalized is still owned by the government. So it's 1-on-1 with them, a place that does mass surveillance on us. And obviously we just had a TikTok deal go through to stop that part of it. But there's a bunch of people that we don't know where they are or how they got in, basically, who have come through the border and set up shop around our military bases and farmland here. We have a reverse opium war going on with them. They've bought up influence around the world with ports and economic development in places that can never pay back the debt, whether it be in Africa or Europe or South America, and their GDP continues to be almost hand in hand with ours. So do you, we had talked about this a bit last time, and I'd love to see where we're at now, like a year and a half later. Is this still, like, if you were pointing at your number one list of concerns over the next 10 to 15 years, is China still at the top of that list?
Maybe.
Maybe.
I would say it's a tie between them and ourselves. I'm more worried about, just like in the Roman Empire, the collapse within, more so than I'm worried about them being able to defeat us in a more overt way. Now, I think it's impossible to argue that they don't have a heavy influence in our collapsing of ourselves within our